you enjoy the finer things in life? Well, if you do, I guarantee that you would enjoy the Game Boy Color. Oh, wait a minute. Where'd my Game Boy Color go? Man, I think I might have left it in 1998. All right, well, just give me a minute. I'm going to go teleport. So my last class today got canceled, and so I basically have like a huge chunk of the day that is free, that's not normally free. So, as I was walking back, I was playing a little bit of Kirby on this thing, and I was just thinking like, you know what, let's talk about this thing, because I've got a lot to say. So it came out in 1998, which is a good 9 years after the original Game Boy. Well, was it exactly 9 years? Well, the original Game Boy came out in 89, and this came out in 98, so yeah, it was a 9-year span, a 9-year gap. So 9 years after the original Game Boy, the color released. And, I think you can probably figure out for yourself what it does differently, but yeah, no, the Game Boy Color is basically, it's basically a Game Boy with games that are in color now, and there were a handful of games that they made for the Game Boy Color that only worked in the Game Boy Color. Now, a lot of them were Game Boy games primarily, but they had, special features, which was full color, if you used them on the Game Boy Color. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of these releases you still could play on the original Game Boy. It would just be in black and white. A big example of this to me is Pokemon Gold and Silver, which, so those games were, marketed as a Game Boy Color game. But technically speaking, I would say they were original Game Boy games because they could completely work on an original Game Boy and they would work just fine. The only thing is that, they would be in black and white. There would be no color. And, I mean, that is a big deal. To me, that's a big deal breaker for Pokemon. It's because you want to see all, like, the little colorful characters, you know what I mean? But, later on in the Color's lifespan, they were making games, or I don't want to say later on. Yeah, they were making a handful of games that did not play on the Game Boy. It had to be a color. And from the top of my, I don't think that's the right saying. Just from memory, a couple I can think of are Pokemon Crystal, and Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, and the Mario Golf and the Mario Tennis, like Game Boy Color releases. And to indicate that it was only a Game Boy Color game, a lot of them would be marketed. Like the shell that they were in would be completely transparent, and you can sort of see the board inside of it, which, that's pretty cool. Let me see if I have one of those. I can't exactly remember because again, I couldn't bring my whole collection to the dorm. I mean, okay, that would be super sick, but I would probably be a little bit of a dorm hermit if I did that, and you know what I mean? I don't want to do that, right? So I also, just so I don't have to constantly, bring it here and back home constantly, like, sort of back and forth, I ultimately decided to only just bring a handful of games and just a few systems. But I do have one of these, and so Pokemon Crystal is a little bit of a unique example because it uses a special. It has a special like color tinting of the shell that wasn't on any of the other like Game Boy Color exclusive games, but it does show off the sort of transparentness. If you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but you can when you look through this, you can see the motherboard. Yeah, you can see the you can see the board. You can see the board through the shell because they made them transparent. And normally it would be a complete transparent, not this sort of blue tint that's on this one, but it's special because this is crystal, and they made, usually with the Pokemon games, they in the early days with the original few Pokemon games on the Game Boy systems, they would make the cartridges a unique color. Like red was red and blue was blue, yellow was yellow, and so on, right? So for crystal, they sort of made it the color of try to make it sort of look like a crystal, in my opinion, because it's blue and it's got like all these little like dotted, like, this almost kind of looks like glitter. I think this actually might be a little bit of glitter on this, or like on a glitter design on the shell, perhaps. But yeah, no, I think that the Game Boy Color was a great way to slowly ease Game Boy fans into, like the next system, right? Because if they just straight up made the Game Boy Color and said, yeah, all the new games, you have to buy it on this one, I think people might be a little bit upset with that. But instead what they did is they slowly eased fans into it by, making games that would work both on the Game Boy and on the Color. But if you bought the Color, they sort of market it like the experience would be a little bit better because it's in full color, you know what I mean? And I like how the Game Boy Color logo is all in color also to sort of signify that. But yeah, this thing is really cool to me because I think, okay, one, it's a cool system. I think it's a quite I'm blanking really bad. I'll say that it's quite a nifty game console. Obviously with the Game Boy, it's meant to fit in your pocket, and I think that this takes after the Game Boy Pocket, which is its predecessor. And that this thing isn't a big beast, kind of like the original Game Boy. You can definitely slip this thing in your pocket. Like, for example, if you compare it to a modern day phone, this is a iPhone 11, and this is a Game Boy Color. It's smaller, and well, it is thicker by a bit, but it is also, it's shorter. So this thing can absolutely go in your pocket. And it's very cool. And again, I think this is something that a lot of game systems do, but I am very glad that portable game console developers understood that these things are going to be in the pocket. So if you have a cartridge in it, it shouldn't be sticking out any. It just, fits in there really well, so you can put it in your pocket. It's not going to mess with your game or anything. That's another one. And so it takes 2 AA batteries, and I can't say off the top of my head how many hours of gameplay you're going to get out of that, but so I've had these batteries in for probably a good 6, maybe 7 hours of gameplay, and it's still running, which that is really good. Plus, okay, so for me, I do have rechargeable batteries, so that's even better because I don't have to be rebuying them. I can just give it a little quick recharge. But no, yeah. So what I've been playing on this right now is it's been a combination of a couple things. A lot of Pokemon Crystal. I've been sort of playing through that. And I would say a bit of Kirby's Dream Land 2 right now, which this is what's in my system right now. So this is actually an original Game Boy game. But I'm just playing it on the Color because, well, one, I didn't bring an original Game Boy, and two, when you put an original Game Boy game, again, this is super common knowledge for maybe a more seasoned retro game fan, but if you're maybe not too familiar with the Game Boy Color, or maybe you just don't own one, just some extra information to those who do not know, if you put in an original Game Boy game into a Color, it will basically give it it's kind of cool how they did this, because the original Game Boy games were made with only having a few shades of black as the color scheme in mind. So basically it was in black and white, basically. And so, the technology, you couldn't just take a game that was intended to be made with only black and white graphics and give it a million different colors. So what they could do, though, is basically give it a sort of preset. So let's say, for example, the game uses 4 different colors, maybe. At the very least, what the Game Boy Color could do is replace those 4 shades of black with a different color preset. Like, for example, in Kirby Dream Land 2, if you play it on the Game Boy Color, instead of it being those 4 shades of black, you'll get, like, Kirby will become pink, and his, like, little animal friends will become a certain, like, similar color. And then all the background stuff will become, like, colors of, or shades of blue and green. So in actuality, you know, considering they did what they could, yeah, are the colors absolutely vibrant as hell? Well, I wouldn't particularly say that, but it looks good. It looks good, and it's still aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And it works. It's almost like I don't think they necessarily... Man. It's almost like I don't think they necessarily needed a million different color schemes going on at once. It's enough. Because again, the game was intended to be played on a black and white game console, and, you know, in order for this thing to just pop into a Game Boy Color and just run with color, they had to make some sacrifices. But it works, and it works well, and I really don't have any complaints. And you are not locked to one color preset. On the title screen of the Game Boy Color, and this is also if you play any Game Boy Color games on an advance, because they're all backwards compatible. At the title screen, I think it's a combination on the D-pad. Right as the Game Boy logo goes across the screen, you can tilt the D-pad to change the color scheme. Like you can change among a bunch of different color presets, which that's really, really cool for customization. Like if you are not a fan of the color preset they gave you, you can change it, and that's really cool. And they do have a preset that just sets it back to black and white if you're thinking, I almost like the way that it looked in black and white. If for some reason that is how you feel, me personally, I think there's very few games I would prefer to play in black and white, but I think Pokemon genuinely might be one of them that I would choose black and white for, because with such a limited set of colors, it's going to be you're probably going to have, like, your Pokemon are probably going to be the wrong color if you were to use some sort of color preset, which, again, absolutely understandable. Pokemon was not made for, like, with the intention that, like, there's going to be a Game Boy Color. At least, obviously, I wouldn't know that. I think Nintendo would know that the most, but, however, Pokemon was made with the Super Game Boy in mind, which was a Super Nintendo add-on that let you play Game Boy games on your Super Nintendo, and a handful of Game Boy games would have full color presets. So, if only they made that compatible with the Game Boy Color as well, so that you can use those color presets, that would be cool. But I don't think the technology was the exact same among the Super Game Boy and the Color. I think it was a little bit different to some degree. So maybe that wouldn't work. But yeah, so I think at this point, I've probably done enough of this, you know what I mean? So, I guess I'll show a little bit of gameplay. So, if you take a look, when I boot up, so right now I have Kirby in it, Kirby's Dream Land 2. When I boot it up, this game is normally supposed to be in black and white, but there's a handful of colors being displayed. So from what I can tell, there's this sort of blue shade, and there's some green and yellow, and then there's a bit of shades of red. Obviously, like an extremely light red, which is pink. But yeah, obviously, like, if this game were to be made on a full color game system, it probably would have more colors than this, but just because it was made on the Game Boy, when you're playing it on a color, you're going to be a little bit limited in what you get, but I think it looks freaking good. I still think it looks pretty good, honestly. I have no complaints here. I don't know I'm going to play a whole lot of Kirby. I really just specifically wanted to show the colors, so I guess I'll go into this level. Oh, I have to go to level 1. That makes sense. Elephant in the room, I'm not yapping right now. I don't want to ruin this gameplay. My voice is kind of annoying. I should have eaten that. Shit. I'm sorry, hamster. I'm gonna go with the owl. Oh man. It's kind of cool because the themes change for each animal buddy that you use. The owl's pretty cool. I like how the animations with Kirby are super animated and goofy. Oh man, that was a good one too. Ooh, I wonder. I forgot what this one did. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I remember now. So one of these days, I do want to talk about Kirby Dream Land 3 because that one further goes into the gameplay mechanics with the little animal buddies. And that one's on the Super Nintendo. Oh, I did it wrong. But yeah, no, just when I think that eventually I do want to make more videos on these Kirby's Dream Land games and like all the other Kirby games, but I'm not going to play too much of this because I want this, this to me is supposed to generally just be on the Game Boy Color, like, sort of as a whole. Um, so I'm going to stop playing this and I am going to quickly go to Crystal, just for a little bit. I just want to show off the color. Mainly, that's what I'm trying to do with these games, just show off the Game Boy Color itself. But I'm going to have to talk about Crystal one day, because it is a great one. It really is. So if you can tell with this one, it's going to be in full color. This intro is pretty cool. I don't want to dwell on it too much, though. Nah, screw it. We'll watch it. Man, I love this intro. Ooh, look at that. Oh, that's awesome. So, just a heads up, the colors definitely, okay, let's look at it from here. This little crystal icon back here is actually supposed to be purple, but I think the lighting might be messing with it a little bit. Let's see if that helps. Okay, it looks a bit more right now. So really all I want to show off is look at how many colors are going on right now. I mean, that's a lot. You know what I mean? Obviously, this game was made with color in mind. Now let me show you some of the Pokemon. Look at that. So look at all the colors displayed on this Pokemon. And then this one. And then this one. All I'm going to say is there's no way this game can't be a Game Boy exclusive, right? But yeah, no, so Crystal, if for those of you who aren't super into Pokemon Crystal is basically just a slightly revamped version of Pokemon Gold and Silver. They don't add like a ton to it, but one big thing they do is that they fix a lot of. So some of the Pokemon designs in Gold and Silver were a bit different than their artwork depicted. So what they did in Crystal was fixed some of the sprites in this game to accurately depict the artwork that they made for them. So for example, let me go to Spinnerack down here. So Spinnerack in Pokemon Gold and Silver was actually blue, but in its artwork it was green, and in the anime it was green. So like it was supposed to be green basically. So when Crystal came out, they fixed Spinnerack's colors and made it green. And that's the same for a couple others. Like one of them is Sneasel. Sneasel's supposed to be like a dark blue, almost black color, and then it has a red like a feather. I don't even know what that thing is on its head. It's basically its color schemes are a bit of dark blue and red, but in Gold and Silver it was actually like a brown color. And I'm not gonna lie, Sneasel's final design is so much better than that initial one showed in Gold and Silver. But yeah, and then how about this? I'm gonna briefly go into a battle to kind of show off all the different color schemes that are going on at once. Look at how many colors are being displayed just right now. This is the coolest part about the Game Boy Color. From the Game Boy to this is, in my opinion, graphically, it's not the most insane jump ever, but When we're talking colors, it's huge. It's really huge. Um, yeah, I guess I'll just knock this guy out with my Pidgey. I know Pidgey's a boring pick, but my thing is that I don't think I've technically ever used a Pidgeot in a playthrough ever. So I might as well do it at some point, right? So I may keep Pidgey on my team. I may not. Just gotta save the freaking game. Well, damn, that was a long one. I've been trying to eat 4 meals a day to bulk up a little bit. Um, and I got to get better about eating at a consistent time. So I'm gonna get out of here and get a bite. Well, you've heard it here. If you're a fan of the Game Boy, what am I gonna yap about? You know what? I don't even know what I'm gonna yap about, so I might just not. I might just not. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. Um, the Game Boy Color is pretty cool, and it's kind of and well, no shit, it is pretty cool. They came out in a bunch of different color schemes, and this is for like the Game Boys in general. I know that the original Game Boy had a what was it like a play it loud line where they had a bunch of different colors. The thing that's cool about the Game Boy is because they're so personable. You know what I mean? Like if you can buy one that is correspondent to your favorite color, and I think that really is cool for design and sort of uniqueness and personality to each person's Game Boy. Because, for example, at this point, a lot of game consoles, there were only so many like different color schemes for consoles. I know the N64 was doing a decent job with this, but other than that, you know what I mean? The Game Boy did it best, in my opinion, at least. Um, but yeah, this is my stim. When I go in public, this is my stim. This is my stim. It's like I don't know. You could be on your phone, but that's boring. If you're gonna be antisocial in public, you got to do it in a fun way. That's the Game Boy Color. All right, well, this is bad. I think this video is gonna end up being probably like over 20 minutes, and that's pretty bad. So if you've watched this entire thing, if you've bared through. I don't think that sounds right. Let me say this. If you've survived um over 20 minutes of an Evan 30 video, I salute you and I have respect for you. That's awesome. All right, well, I've got to get out of here. Goodbye.